Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and this is a Fiat Barchetta, or Barchetta if you're pronouncing it in Italian. Really excited to do this car today. It's quite interesting because it is the natural sort of evolution, I suppose, of the Fiat Sport Spider. Fiat had a lot of success with the Spider in the 70s, particularly in the US. But Fiat being Fiat, they basically let it die a very agonizing slow death without replacing it. Instead of looking at the reasons why it stopped selling so well, which were really to do with quality and reliability, they decided that there was no money in roadsters. So they were shocked a few years later, in 1990, well 1989 actually, when Mazda released the MX5 and it sold 100,000 units within the first year. Having seen that it was still possible to make money on these, in 1990, Fiat decided to have a go at making a competitor for the MX5. This is the end result, the Barchetta. Now it looks like quite an interesting car. It means little boat in Italian. Unfortunately, Fiat were facing some constraints. Financially, they weren't able to develop a whole new project for this, so they used existing underpinnings from the Fiat Punto. It's a shortened sort of chassis from that car. Now the Punto was never really designed as a sports car, so this has McPherson struts at the front, trailing arms at the rear, but worst of all, it is front wheel drive. Compare that to the Mazda, which has double wishbones all round and rear wheel drive, and things are not off to a good start for the little Fiat. But let's take it out and see how it drives. This is a facelifted version. They were made from 95 to 2005. Halfway through, Maggiora, who were making them, went bankrupt. Fiat took the process in-house, but I think that there was a lull of 2 or 3 years. And when this came out, obviously they had to have a third brake light, I think for legal reasons, so that was integrated into the back. Also, the front end was changed, smoothed over a little bit, and I think personally it loses out a little bit on the original design. I think I do prefer the way the original ones looked. It's still a really pretty car though. And the interior, well, it's simple. There's not much room in here. To be honest, I think an MX5 is roomier. The dash is really quite close to you. Despite that, you're quite comfortable. Wheel and gear change are perfectly within reach, and the interior is charming, if a little bit cheap looking. The first MX5 anyway, I think that interior wasn't really that much better than this. It has a 1.8 variable valve engine. Let's see how it goes. 130 horsepower. I think this was just under, it was about 1,000 kilos, this car. So it should be nippy, if not fast. It absolutely is. Not a ball of fire, but definitely has enough power to keep you entertained. The engine is really pretty smooth. It's not quite as characterful as I was hoping for an Italian engine. Maybe by this era they were starting to sanitize them a little bit, but the gear change is light and it's quite nice if judged by the standards of any normal car. Because we're comparing this to the MX5, then it falls down because it is just nowhere near as good. The MX5 has one of the best gear changes of all time. Goes straight down into the gearbox. I think this has to travel on rods to go to the gearbox under the engine, so it's just not as good. There is though one area where this is already excelling, and that is in the steering. Wow, I didn't think it would feel like this. The steering is absolutely lovely. It's so responsive. It feels quite quick. I assume they must have sort of speeded it up from the standard rack, because immediately it just feels so chuckable. There's loads of feel coming through. Again, odd, drive a modern car, drive this, you will be blown away. You know exactly what's going on with those front wheels. At slower speeds, the suspension is really pretty good. It's it feels quite well set up. When you're going faster, the car does seem to move around a little bit. It's like it's not coping with those bumps quite as well at the higher speeds. It just seems to move with them rather than absorb them. So the MX5 in its first year sold 100,000 units. It's a bit sad to say really, but in its 10-year production run, the Barchetta only sold 60,000. So it's a really rare car. That's great though, because to be fair, everybody does have MX5s. So this is something a little bit different in every way. Mechanically, looks-wise, it has a real sort of Italian stamp on it. It's just a real shame that they didn't make it rear-wheel drive, but we're coming up to the S's and I'll see how it deals with that. Perhaps the front-wheel drive thing isn't too much of a handicap. Nice and stable. Down into second for the little hairpin. It's really pretty tidy. So it goes all the way up to 7,000, the little 1.8, but it's just odd. I'm surprised it's not the most charismatic little lump. The 1.8 from the MX5 is definitely a bit more engaging than this. Now though, back through the S's. And this thing is a lot of fun. That front end is just, I mean, it's incredible that this is based on a Punto because it feels so much better. It really does. It is a world apart. I think ultimately when it comes to real dynamics, so that is throwing it down the road fast. It doesn't feel as polished as an MX5, not just from the dynamics in the corners. In the corners it's almost, I'd say, almost as much fun because the front end is just so well judged, so agile, there's so much feel coming through that it's fun even though you can't really play with the back. It is good fun and it doesn't feel understeery either, but driving it fast on a little road like this, you kind of feel the limitations just because it's not, the suspension just doesn't feel like it's working as well. I think because it's hampered by those trailing arms, which aren't exactly a sports car setup. Okay, 911s have them, but that was more of a packaging issue, or the old 911s do anyway. That was more of a packaging issue than anything else. And so it just doesn't feel quite as good at the higher speeds. It's quite linear. It does get a little bit of extra pep around 4,000, which is where I think the variable valve timing sort of chips in. And it's quite an easy car to sort of throw around quickly. It's pretty instinctive. You don't have to worry about the back end too much, so it's good fun. It makes an interesting alternative to an MX5, this little car. I think that objectively, in almost every area, the MX5 is better. Gear change is better, the rear drive chassis is better, the engines are actually more engaging, which really surprised me. I thought that might be a trump card for the Barchetta, but I'm surprised at just how much fun this thing is, and you can just get in it straight away. It's easy to drive, it's engaging straight away. The way the front end of the car works really, it makes it really good fun. It does have some limitations though. The way it handles sort of bumps on the road isn't really that great. The ride feels a little bit brittle. It doesn't feel like, the car it's not upset by mid-corner bumps or anything like that, but I don't know if you can see now, I'm moving around a lot. An MX5 would be working much better with this road surface than this. The thing is though that these are so rare, the design is so unique, that all that does definitely go in its favour. There's nothing quite like the original Barchetta, and it definitely does have some of that Italian spirit and verve, even though some areas do let it down a little bit. Thank you all so much for watching. Now if you want to see a video on the original Spider, the Fiat 124 Sport Spider, which gives you the whole history of what happened with that car, and those are also amazing cars, and that is rear-wheel drive, then have a look at this. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.